Welcome to Preparing for Work, the series which aims to help you transition between university and the workplace. Today we'll be exploring integrating into your team. So I'll give you a scenario. So you've just started work and you've been introduced to various people and you've been allocated your desk and you're going to sit next to your team for the first time properly. So I'd like you to just pause this video and think about the sorts of things that you'd be asking your teammates that could potentially help you in your first few weeks. So you've had a think now about the different things that perhaps you might want to find out from your team. And I've put together a little list here just to help you think of more practical things that might help you in the next few weeks. So hopefully you'll find some of those questions that you've asked in there too. How do people in the team stay in touch with each other? Do you have to block various time out in your diary? Do you have to keep your diary quite up to date so people know where you are? Is there a buddy system? So do you have somebody who's your main point of contact beyond your line manager who can help you through this more practical stuff? So that sort of stuff is quite helpful, I think. And if you don't have any of those things, I think it's just making yourself aware of who knows what and kind of operating kind of almost like a little directory of sort of help for yourself over the coming weeks. If, like me, you have the world's worst memory, I mean, quite literally, as soon as I'm introduced to somebody, it goes right out of my head. I would really like to introduce a label maker and label everybody, but apparently socially that's not really acceptable. So I think the next best thing is to carry around a notebook and a pen. And one of the really great things that you could do with your team is, certainly in the early days, is to create a seating plan in your notebook and just label kind of where people are sitting. And that way you can kind of revise at home, but also you can use it as a point of reference for when you need to. Other things that you could be asking your team are things around, how do they like to communicate? So is there a team meeting kind of once a week, once a month? How do you get across what you're doing in your work so that you're not completely working in silo? And also, in terms of their own working patterns, are they also working the same hours as you, or are they working slightly different hours? So it's good for you to remember. The main thing that I think would be really useful to know from your teammates are, what are they actually doing in terms of their role? So how does their role interact with yours? And how would they like you to work with them? So who are your stakeholders? So these are the people who you either work for, or either directly or indirectly, or who will have a stake in your work and the outcomes of your work. So it's important to work out from your team how that works. It's also important to work out, and your manager may or may not go through this, but to work out how, your team structure. And I'm talking about hierarchy here. I'm talking about, how does your team fit in with other teams in your departments? And, how does your department fit into the wider organization? Everyone's working to the same goal. What is that goal? And how does your team fit into that? Also thinking about the management structure of the team, and also the organization, how everybody sort of relates to each other, which is a lot easier when you're working for an SME, but much harder when you're working for larger organizations. That becomes even more important to work out how you fit in and what your where your work goes, basically. I thought a helpful thought would be that sometimes teams have never experienced a graduate in their team before. So this will potentially be new to everybody. Or it could be that they've had graduates in their teams for many, many years. It could also be that members of the team were not graduates themselves and have never been to university. Maybe they've worked for the organisation since they left school and have been there for sort of 20, 30 years. So it's worth thinking about kind of where people have come from in terms of their own experiences, and also respecting those experiences as you would with anybody. So now I'd like you to pause the video for about a minute and think about two things that might stop you from integrating into the team in the way that you would like to. Okay, so thinking about some of the barriers, which I hope you'll highlight too, but certainly one of the strongest barriers I've found working virtually is that when you do work virtually, you have to work twice as hard to build team relationships and to maintain your profile and your visibility. And obviously other things may impact that too, but I think it can be quite tricky. I think also when you get so bogged down with your work, which you will eventually, because it's just a natural thing to happen at work during a busy period, that you don't sometimes raise your head above the parapet and see what's going on, and also looking after your own well-being, which sometimes then does have an impact on others. So that you then sort of, because you are so focused on your work, tend to forget sort of to communicate with others what you're doing, and those social activities that the team participates in, even if it's just to have that coffee chat or that chat over the water cooler or the printer. Sometimes those things really do actually count in terms of, the sort of bonding process with teammates. I think sometimes when you are quite bogged down as well, it's hard to raise your head above the parapet and see actually what's going on with the team. So there may be other teammates that are struggling and that you don't know because you're so sort of focused on the work. Thank you for watching. I hope you found it useful in terms of thinking of the things that crop up and allowed you the space to think about how you might handle these situations. If there's anything from this topic or throughout the series that you think you want to explore further, then please do book a time with a careers consultant. We're not just here for the job search, we're also here to help you through the transition between university and work. Before you go, if you liked this episode, please do feel free to press the little like button. And also if you'd like to stay in touch with us, please feel free to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.